Okay, and we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pitch Feedback Live. My name is Maddie Mindling. I am part of the community team here at Tongle, and joining me today is Director of Production, Stephen Iwanek, and longtime producer. Hello, Stephen. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, hello.
So today we're going to be taking a look at 4 different pitches from filmmakers in our community who've graciously volunteered their work for the purpose of this live stream, and we will be giving pitch feedback in real time so all of you can get a better sense of our process and how producers and our sponsors evaluate pitches. We know it is not easy to have your work dissected in front of others. That may even be a stress stream for some of us, but rest assured, these pitches are really awesome, which will make it even harder for us to find those more, I think, nuanced pieces of feedback that go beyond, our basic pitch tips 101, which is another great resource, by the way, which we have on our website, on our Tongle 101 page. So we sincerely appreciate the filmmakers who have offered themselves as tribute. But again, kidding aside, these are some really great pitches that we'll be taking a look at today. And most of them were, in fact, very close to getting the green light on the projects they were submitted to. Either they got great pitch feedback, or which is not something that we really dole out very lightly on our projects, or they were a finalist, meaning that their pitch made it into the final round of deliberations within the sponsors team or the clients team. So today we're going to be taking a look at those subtler adjustments that you can make in order to turn a great pitch into an even better pitch. So if you want to learn the basics for creating a pitch, you can head over to our pitch tips page on our Tongle 101 underneath the community tab. But today we really want to dig deep into, again, those more nuanced pieces of feedback and give you a window into the process to help you make a better pitch. So even if it's just a few minor things that you can change. So really think of this as more of your honors class as opposed to your 101 class. And Stephen, you will be the professor of this class today.
I'm just making grammatical and spelling error checks there. So it's going to be really nuanced. Yeah.
And again,
no Oxford commas.
Yes. We had some really I feel like lively debates about Oxford commas in the past in our about our briefs mostly. I'm surprised more people don't use an Oxford comma, but I digress. This is intended to be a learning experience again for everyone involved. This is the first time that we've ever done this live. As part of our live stream, we do occasionally do pitch feedback workshops that are kind of more of an internal thing. So this is really exciting to be able to share it with everyone. And if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to ask them in the forums. We'll be checking those periodically. You can also say hi, introduce yourself.
Hi, John. Hi, Jen.
Hey guys, how's it going? Let me actually look at some of the comments that are coming in. Hey, welcome, all the way from Norfolk and Virginia Beach. Nice, very cool, guys.
John's working on some awesome sci-fi logo videos for us right now.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
Super psyched.
And if you're interested in having one of your pitches reviewed on our next episode of Pitch Feedback Live, please feel free to drop us a line at info@tongle.com and let us know which of your past pitches you'd like us to consider for our programming for next time. But before we dive in, I thought I'd take a quick detour to get to know my co-host a little bit better. So not just Stephen the producer or Stephen the professor, but Stephen the person. So Stephen, your job before becoming a Tongle producer was basically discovering talent. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I was curious, how has that translated into your work here at Tongle?
It's actually really straightforward in a lot of ways. I used to troll Reddit and IO9 and Vimeo and whatnot, looking for really cool short films, or the majority of the people that I used to represent were sort of TV writers, right? So I'd read a tremendous amount. But it was always about sort of finding the potential in something, because oftentimes there's unrealized potential in the sense that this person's got a great idea. They might not quite know how to express it fully, or they might not have the sort of experience and polish yet for it to sort of pop. But seeing that potential, the cool idea, a cool voice, a cool style, was something that like I spent years sort of looking for. And so coming over to Tongle, which was 5 years ago now, it was such a one-to-one correlation in what I was doing, because basically pitches come in and I'm like trying to find potential. Like, this is super cool. If we tweaked it like this, it could be amazing. Or it's not even that it needs to be amazing. Sometimes just like, if we tweak it like this, then the brand's gonna like it.
Yeah. Have you made any well-known discoveries in your career?
Relevant to a quote you're going to share later.
Yes.
One of my early signs was Boyun Kim and her writing partner, Erica Lippold. They're creating the new Star Trek show, which is on hold because of COVID. But this is the Michelle Yeoh spinoff. They were writing on Star Trek for a little while, and just as like a really interesting example, like one had a master's degree in anthropology, one was getting her PhD in neurobiology at USC, and they had a really cool voice and a really cool background, and like seeing the potential in that, and seeing how it could sort of like turn into cool scripts was really fun, and I see that in a lot of people that I work with, and it's super cool. So
they came in as kind of a writing duo.
Yeah. Simon was a writing duo, put them on a CW show named Rain, and then it just kind of spiraled, and now it's Star Trek, which is awesome.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Especially to like see potential in like a writing partnership, I think is kind of fascinating. So another question I have for you is, have you been learning any new skills or taking on any new hobbies in quarantine?
I want to say yes to like seem impressive, but no. We've been really busy. So I've in a really boring way focused on work. Yeah. I've been doing lots of housework, but like not really new skills. I've been obsessed with buying plants. Not really a new skill
the
necessarily.
Outdoors, indoors.
Yeah.
Good. And then let's go ahead and take a look at that quote from Captain Picard, because I know that you definitely wanted to kind of bring this up as we talk more about some of the awesome pitches that we're going to look at today. Whoops, sorry. Let me see if I can redo this. I am live editing all this stuff, so give me a second here. Okay. Hold on a second. How do I take you guys out of the stream? Okay. Oh. Yeah, so give me a second, guys. Let me add you back to the stream. So yeah, so we get so many amazing pitches on each of our projects that it's hard for us to. We can't greenlight all of them, and it is sometimes about being persistent. And Stephen, I know you can speak to this a little bit more than I can, but it is sometimes a really difficult process to work with a sponsor to make that decision. And so I want you to just talk a little about why you wanted to include this quote after, all of that cumbersome live streaming. But yeah, just wanted to.
All good. I saw a comment that maybe people couldn't hear me for a moment, but it's possible to commit no errors and still lose. That's the key part of the Picard quote that I always like. That's just life. When I was representing writers and directors, you'd send them out on general meetings, you'd send them out to pitch on projects, you'd send them into networks, and the vast majority of time you lose, right? It's not necessarily because the pitch isn't good enough, because there are so many factors that play into everything. Some of the best filmmakers on Tongle, or the filmmakers, I should say, that like work the most, are the most tireless in pitching. So they get selected on a lot of things. And certainly the more they work, the better they get, the more likely they are to get picked. But they don't get picked the vast majority of time. And oftentimes people come to me and they're looking for feedback, and my feedback is like, your pitch was awesome. Instead of going left, the brand went right. I can give as much guidance. I can give the best read I can possibly give into like the psyche of a brand, or whatever it is that we're working with. But sometimes somebody just responds to something, and it's occasionally so random that you can never really predict it.
Yeah. I think that's a good kind of message to start with at the top of our pitch feedback live stream. One more question for you, or I guess one more story I wanted to tell everyone about you. That goes a little beyond just who you are as a producer at Tongle, but you're also a very avid cyclist. And since we've been in quarantine, you have been paying surprise visits to coworkers at their homes in the morning and cycling all around LA, really. And kind of, I think, working your way outwards to visit people while they're in quarantine. And I just want to show a few pictures, and I don't know if you can like elaborate or give any stories of some of the people you visited, and we can maybe introduce some of them. But yeah, I just think that's such a great way to, kind of stay connected as coworkers. And so this is you visiting our product manager, Kelsey. And then we have one of you visiting Tommy, one of our other producers. Has anyone's bike ride been more challenging than others, or any kind of? And then here's Caitlin, one of our accounts managers.
Tommy lives on a hill. Didn't know that until I got there.
It looks like a pretty steep incline there.
Yeah. It's I think it goes without saying, everyone here at Tongle, we're privileged that we're working, we're busy. I feel really lucky in that sense. It's still super, super, super hard for everyone right now. I spend the 90% of my waking hours in this little converted closet. And interacting with people on video chat, talking to people, emailing with people. I have so many filmmakers I'm going back and forth with, but I know for your colleagues, for the people you're really close with, your friends, it's so important to still be there. And it felt, I think, special and meaningful to kind of just show up from a very safe distance. I don't think I got within 12 feet of anybody. And took off masks to smile, but it was great. I bring a little foldable cup. They come out, they pour some coffee in it. They back away. I come and collect my cup, and then we have a good coffee. And I think it's been nice, and I'm continuing to do it. And Maddie lives up over the Hollywood Hills, and that's going to be a hell of a hike when I do that. But
you got to work your way up to that.
I'm doing it. 4,000 feet elevation gain.
Please be careful. Please do not injure yourself.
This is going to be my last live stream, guys.
But yes, I look forward to my visit if you find that you have the endurance to make it all that way. Well, awesome. So I think that's just some of the things that we wanted to share about who you are as a producer, because I know you come on these things a lot and you give so much good feedback, but we never really get to know more about you and kind of what you do outside of Tongle. So yeah, I think we're going to start with our first pitch here. And just so you guys know, we've come up with 5 questions that you can ask yourselves during, when you're coming up with pitches. So this is just sort of, a way to teach you guys to, start asking yourself questions as you go through each of our pitches. So let's go ahead and start with the first one to start with is from Stevie Fernandez, and this is for Western Dental. And so I wanted to just bring up the brief real fast because I thought we would talk about first the objective of the project, so we can kind of go from there. So the objective of this project was to create and produce a direct response suite of videos in English and Spanish for the #1 provider of orthodontics in the US. And it was to be shot in Texas as well. So there's a number of, I think, logistical things here to consider. I think right off the bat, we know you need to be producing the content, bilingual content. So that's something, that you might want to address in your pitch. And also it's direct response, which is such a unique format. And I know, Stephen, you've actually produced quite a bit of direct response stuff in your time. So I was just curious about your take on this type of content.
Direct response is really weird. Direct response, I think, is like the most classic example of like a commercial, because the whole idea behind direct response is that the brand is trying to create something that will drive a direct response immediately after the commercial airs. There's a lot of data and tracking from their media agency usually that goes into something like this. So they know exactly when the spot's going to air, and then they track to see how many people are going to the website right after that. How many people are signing up right after that? They have all that data, and a good direct response gets a direct response, and they track it. And so they see sort of the ways of optimizing a spot for that. And so you think about a lot of brand spots that are all about like the brand colors and what we stand for and everything. Direct response, half the time you see a direct response, it's like a fear-based ad where it's like, is your identity being stolen by hackers in North Korea? Use this product now. And you're like, oh God, is it? But the thing is basically a direct response ad is about presenting a specific problem and offering a specific solution. You have to highlight that problem, that pain point for users, because you're going to get a direct response if somebody connects with that immediately and says, yes, that's a problem. And then here's the direct solution. There's not usually a lot of story in it. There's not usually a lot of character or world building in it. There can be. Geico is maybe the best example of like a more playful direct response ad, because basically, would you like to save 50% or more on your car insurance? Yes. Switch to Geico, right? They get to be a little bit more playful, but they're such an established brand. There's so much sort of equity in the brand that they get to be a little bit more playful. For almost everyone else on the planet, direct response is really straightforward. If you're trying to tell a story, if you're trying to introduce characters, it's not likely to work for direct response.
Right. So it's a very specific format that, has a very specific result that the brand is trying to get at. Yep. And so with that in mind, when you're pitching, I think on direct response, you want to make sure you cover all those bases. And so the first question that we're going to take a look at is just looking at the filmmaker's links to past work. And the reason why we put this first is because this is really what our producers and our clients look at first when they're evaluating a pitch, because they want to see that the filmmaker, their past work ladders up to what they're pitching and that they're going to be able to execute on it. So I'm going to queue up Stevie's first pitch, first link that he submitted to us. So we'll go ahead and watch that together, and then we'll go ahead and discuss.
An arch expander, 4-RPE, is an excellent way to correct a narrow upper arch or crowded upper teeth. The RPE is a simple tool, but sometimes it can take a little bit of practice before you become accustomed to using it.
First, have the patient lie down on a couch with their head in your lap. You'll also need...
So this is basically kind of it's animated, which is interesting because I think direct response can be both animation and live action. But he has done a lot of dental work in the past. So I think that's sort of interesting that this is for Western Dental. So clearly, he's thinking through like, what is my most relevant type of work? The second link that he sent us, do you have anything that you want to say, Stephen, about that quick preview?
Let's look at the second link and then I'll jump in.
Sure, that sounds good. Go ahead and change our view here. Okay. Actually, it's this one here.
We wanted a place where I like to come to work, the staff likes to come to work, and where people like to come for their appointments.
By the way, Emerson Orthodontics, I feel like I want to work there. Please.
We've got some great local artists who have done some great stuff on our walls. We've got an awesome Chris Mantle, local Tulsa.
So yeah, it's more, this is more, I would say, like a corporate identity type video.
Yeah.
But still kind of in the same area of or I guess in the same category of content. But I think you also want to be thinking about not just like, does this fit into the same type of client or same type of vertical, but also the format, the type of filming that you're doing, the style. So I'm sure you could speak more to that, Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple things that jump out at me, but the first thing is sort of a general question is like, how can I get project A if I've only ever done B, right? So when I watch those, the first two links are both animation, and unless you're pitching animation, I wouldn't advise you to include animation in a live action pitch because it can be confusing. And it can sort of lead to questions like, well, can he do live action? The third link is live action. It's heavy on B-roll, and it's not necessarily a direct response format. And then I recall looking at the pitch and sort of seeing like there's a link to the sort of overall portfolio of all the other work they've done. And one of my biggest pet peeves is sort of like links to reels, sort of links to a website. And the thing is, if someone is just sort of like exploring and trying to find a filmmaker to work with, and you're putting all the work on them, then like, they might go to your website, they might go through all of the videos. But when someone's looking at a lot of pitches at the same time, right? And this is sort of a general note, but I think specific to Tongle as well, right? Like I'm looking at 20 to 30 pitches. I don't want to be inefficient with my time. So if I have to go to a website and I have to look through like 20 different videos to find out the one that's relevant to me, it kind of begs a lot of questions, and it's not really helping your case. Because then if I respond to it and I'm like, whoa, they did this one video that's relevant, I know that they included it in their past work, but now I have to make a strong case to the brand and say, look, this person doesn't seem like they're right, and it's an uphill battle. So if you don't necessarily have the work that you're pitching on, and you can't quite show it in links to your past work, it's where a pitch video becomes super relevant. Because if you've done work that you can re-edit into an example of the spot that you want to make, you can do that. And you can show and you can say that, like, I haven't quite done this before, but I've done enough relevant stuff and I can do this. Take a look at my pitch video. I can show you. Makes a huge difference. But if nothing else, curating your links so that the most relevant links are at the top and that there's context around any link that you include. Like, I'm including this animation video. I know I'm not pitching animation, but I wanted to show you that I have expertise in this field.
And in the type of messaging, maybe the animation had more of a direct response type of messaging, and that's what you wanted to bring the evaluator's attention to. So yeah, I think that's a good point. You can use that links to past work section in the submission form to add some context. I think there is a character limit, but it's quite a lot. So yeah, feel free to add a sentence or two to just kind of help elaborate and expand on that. And also, if you don't have something directly in your portfolio, but you're working with a DP who has a lot of experience and you're bringing them on specifically for this project, you can also share a few of their links as well, even if you're not in like some kind of formalized production company. So I think that's an important note to make too. So let's go ahead and take a look at Stevie's pitch deck. And then the second question we're gonna be looking at is just, what is our first impression? I think that's sort of, you guys probably do a quick one over before you really dive deep into the content. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull it up here. Okay, great. So I think I'm just going to scroll through, Stephen, if that works for you, and then we can kind of just quickly talk about our first impression. So I can tell they're already using the Tongle template, and they've sort of made it their own, which is awesome. And that's what those are there for. It really saves you time in creating a pitch. And again, first impression to me is not about like making it pretty or making it, look amazing. Because I feel like we do get a lot of pitches that are gorgeous to look at, but I think producers are really quick to get into the substance of a pitch. And we're going to be taking a look at some pitches today that are, like Word docs. So I think it's for you guys, it's probably more about like what is actually in these pitches. Maybe it looks great, but also you only have a certain amount of time to pitch. Like maybe you have like 3 days to pitch on a project. Don't spend all that time on, making a beautiful pitch deck, spend most of that time on your creative vision and execution. And again, we have those templates to help save you time on the look and feel. So yeah, just looking at this, it looks like this is the general concept, and that there are it looks like that Stevie's putting together some examples and some options for the client, which is always interesting. I think that's been a successful strategy for some of our filmmakers, just, putting together a couple options, and then also included some links to past work within the brief. Not necessary if you're already putting it in that links to past work section, and then a bio here, and then a slide on his team. And yeah, so I would say pretty succinct pitch here, which is great. Doesn't need to be a novel. But yeah, so I think next we can talk more about, did this pitch address the core elements of the brief? So we already know this is direct response, that it's bilingual content. There are a lot of deliverables on this actual brief itself. I think there are like 62 deliverables in different languages using different types of messaging. So we already know that, we want to see something that is going to show your versatility in creating all those deliverables and how you plan to do that in an efficient and budgeted way, because, you're going to have to use graphics to change up the messaging. I think also what's interesting about this brief too, the Western Dental brief, is that it's meant to be VO driven. So that kind of gives you, you can actually use the same talent if you want to, and then use the VO as the bilingual aspect. So yeah, and then I would just say in terms of concept here, so the concept here is, the first initial concept is basically just showing ways in which, having imperfect teeth sort of affect your daily life in funny ways. And so this is sort of a humorous concept, a driver trying to park straight. Each effort ends up crooked. Then we see a close-up of the driver and see that their teeth are crooked. Then we see them putting in or getting set up with clear liners at the ortho office. Next, we see them parking straight. So it's sort of an interesting, clever concept, but I don't think it touches on direct response.
Yeah, I think the problem here is, this is hyper specific, I think, to direct response in many ways. Is in most spots, you want to try and get to the brand and the sort of objective as quickly as possible. You always kind of have to assume with a commercial spot that people are either going to notice it's a commercial and go to their phone, see what's happening on Reddit, or change the channel if they're still watching TV. But it almost felt confusing to me to open in a parking lot and someone trying to drive straight, or open on a baseball field and someone trying to draw a line. And for a direct response especially, you want things to be crystal clear. And so it's not that you can't do this, it's that it's really challenging. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing is, if you want to do something really different like this, and you recognize that it's challenging, or ask yourself whether or not it feels like a direct connection, you can always justify the decision and say, look, we're doing this, but to balance it out and make sure it still works for direct response, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. So it's not that these can't work. It's just that I see concepts here that feel like general brand spots about the need for teeth straightening, but I don't really feel like I know what the direct response reaction is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. And so I think, yeah, that kind of ties back to just really thinking about the format that you're pitching on, and how can you connect your concept to that format and the marketing objective of the client, or, whatever their goals are for that content. And then also just touching on like creating options within a pitch. I actually think this is a really interesting idea, and I've seen it quite a bit on our pitches before. And for some clients, this works really well, when they're given a couple of different options that are kind of based around the same idea. We talk about this idea of optionality, within our pitches. And when you're doing something like that, you have these 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 4 other ideas here that you're kind of touching on. I would kind of do like a little script treatment for each, just so, because I think you want to give equal weight to each option that you're putting forward. Because right now these sort of feel like, well, we can also do this, but I'm not quite sure, exactly what these would look like, what they would sound like, feel like. And so I wanted to actually, I think I have an example of, let's see, of something that does this well. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Here we go. So yeah, so this is a pitch from someone within our community who also likes to put in a lot of optionality within their pitches. And so they basically created this slide of like sample scripts for each idea. And this is also a direct response pitch, by the way. And this is something that's on our Tonga 101 page. So I think I would have liked to have seen you elaborate, or in this pitch, seen elaborated, each of those ideas.
Another little side tip here too on direct response especially is oftentimes you'll see brands follow a best practice like mentioning the brand at least 3 times. For the sample scripts that Kelsey had included on that pitch, the first line on almost every script was "before credit sesame." And like, look, we know it's direct response. Direct response isn't the most exciting format, but there's a reason why it works. And so knowing that elements like that are going to be a part of your spot, I'm seeing something like the crooked mower thing, and I'm thinking like, before Western Dental, I was mowing my lawn. Wait, how does it all work? So it's something to think about, maybe sort of a general suggestion, not necessarily a reaction to this pitch.
Yeah. And I would say, because there are so many deliverables on this, let me pull up the brief real fast. You can see, so 64 total assets, including 4 unique hero videos, each of them done in English and Spanish, mostly driven by VO. I would have liked to have seen more of a breakdown of how you would do this in handle it, I guess, logistically. Do you plan to kind of shoot in the same location with the same talent, using primarily motion graphics to drive the messaging? To save costs there, just kind of having a breakdown on how you plan to deliver these assets from start to finish. And that could just be one slide and just, kind of bullet point exactly how, you plan to address that. I think with something as massive as this project, just having some idea of how you're thinking through that logistically kind of gives the producer some sense of like, okay, like they kind of maybe just showing that you've handled projects of this size before, anything like that, I think would be helpful too. The
social video element is also really important because, inherently a video for Facebook and Instagram is much different. The best practice still for Facebook and Instagram videos is they're not driven by audio. So if your main video is a 16:9 YouTube video and you still have to deliver social videos, there's going to be this question, well, how are you going to do these differently? What are you going to do differently?
Yeah.
Right. And so being able to answer that question means there's less uncertainty in the eyes of the producers, but more importantly, in the eyes of the client.
Right. So that kind of brings us to our second question. Does the creative stand out, but also feel right for the brand? And I think this gives, brands, I do think, brands get excited by concepts that, may be a little bit outside what they normally do, but I think you've said this before, Stephen, like they're not going to change their entire marketing strategy based on a really cool idea. It does have to sort of fit their tone and voice. So we always recommend that you do a little research on your own to see what they've done in the past, what direction they're going in the brief, read the brief pretty carefully, because I do think we try to give you as much information as possible around what type of marketing message they want to, have in the content, what their goals are. We also have brand pages that you can take a look at for some of our clients that are really detailed and just kind of break down all their past campaigns, gives a little information about the brand itself and what their ethos is. But I think these concepts are super clever. I really like the idea of like how imperfect teeth sort of impact your life in different ways and how that, comes out in real life. And so I think these are incredibly clever ideas. I do think they would, like, especially this crooked carpenter one might require a bit more of a budget. And I would have liked to have seen how that would have been, how you would have been able to manage that, maybe with some visual effects work, some storyboarding. But yeah, I think on the whole, these are really clever ideas, but again, they don't get to that direct response results that I think the client was looking for here. And then lastly, and this is really your main department here, Stephen, is do the logistical aspects seem feasible?
There are still a bunch of open questions that I have if I look at a pitch like this. Certainly, as I was saying when we first started getting into this, like I'm here to see potential. And so when we talk about like the crooked carpenter thing, I could think of small scale ways to execute that. So a lot of these feel feasible, right? I could do the crooked carpenter, the crooked mower, and the crooked street lines all at the same location. It's just that because those are open questions and it's sort of on me to see that potential and try and come up with solutions, there just still be some hesitation. Because again, it becomes an uphill battle and I have to convince the brand that this is doable. So I would have liked a little bit more clarity to sort of, address whether or not this is feasible and to show that like we're able to do this, because these would still be complicated to execute.
Right.
But it's not impossible.
Yeah. So that gets us into our next pitch, which is based on the, let me take off the question here, which is based on the At Home with Amy Sedaris and Cooking Spoof video project. And this is a really fun project. So I would say the objectives here basically talk about, how these videos need to fit into the world of At Home with Amy Sedaris. And if you haven't watched the show, it's very funny. There's a lot of different quirky characters on the show that she introduces every week, and they all have some interesting storyline and how they connect to Amy Sedaris's life. So I do think that's an important element if you are pitching on this project. And then of course they want something funny, but also they're looking for crafting and cooking tutorials. It looks like they're looking for up to 3 30 to 60 seconds each crafting videos and up to 3 30 to 60 seconds each cooking tutorials. And so the next filmmaker we're going to be taking a look at here, let me see if I can pull up her pitch. This is actually a very, very funny pitch here. Let me pull up my notes from Danielle de Ambra. And so again, this is a really good example. Do you want to look at our videos first, Stephen?
Yeah.
The pitch? Okay.
Sure.
Let me go ahead and pull up the video since that's kind of the way we've been. And she did do a really funny pitch video, so we'll take a look at that as well. Okay, so this was the first video that she had in her links to past work. It's like a really fun social video. And I think it is interesting because this does touch on the format. Oh, it looks like I'm going to play something else on YouTube. Hold on one second. Don't autoplay. So yeah, I think the brief does touch on like doing vertical videos for Instagram stories. So I think in terms of format, this works. But let's look at our other video, and I think we can kind of talk about them as a whole. So this is the second link that Danielle included in her pitch.
Maddie's dancing. All right, I think we get the sense of that.
Yeah, so I think you kind of get the gist, but this looks more like a reel to me. I would love to see the individual videos from these. But yes, it does touch more on the cooking and crafting DIY tutorial aspect of the pitch. Do you have anything else you want to add, Stephen, before I move on to the treatment?
Well, I know one of the best videos I actually saw was in the treatment. It was a TikTok video on how to make roasted stuffed peppers. Mm-hmm. I
thought the exact same thing. That's so funny.
Yeah.
But it wasn't in her links to past work. It was actually in the treatment. So I thought it was interesting that the links in the treatment and the links in the past work didn't quite match up. Yeah. So I thought that was a really good. I also thought that was much more relevant.
What's interesting about it is I think that there might have been sort of like a good thought, but a misprioritization in the way she sort of set up the links. The first link that we looked at is Danny. And she is a character in the video that she's pitching. And so I think the motivation behind that, I could be wrong, right, is that like, I want to show you the character that you'd be buying into if you greenlit my pitch. The thing is, the first question is always like, can you make the right video? If yes, then we can move down to other creative considerations. Because I don't think it would be impossible for the brand to say, this filmmaker pitch is great, but we might want to recast Danny or something like that. And so by leading with the character video, it leaves open-ended a lot of the questions that are ultimately more relevant.
Yeah. Do you want to get into her pitch video first before we get into the treatment?
No, I didn't get into the treatment.
Treatment first. Okay, perfect. Let me pull it up here. Okay, so yeah, here's the treatment. So yeah, we got a couple of pictures, I'm assuming, of the character Danny, and then also the real creator here. And then we start with, it looks like some crafting ideas, some tie-dye. It looks like these are two different ideas, so I would maybe kind of draw that out a little bit more. And then we get right into an episode breakdown, which I think is great. You know, just kind of getting right into the, you know, the concept. And again, the True TV is looking to greenlight for 3 different episodes at the very least that are crafting or cooking tutorials, DIY tutorials. And so she does an episode breakdown for 3 of them, and then gives another gives a handful of examples for other episode topics, which I think is a good way of showing like, hey, this has legs, you know. And then also just showing what her inspiration is. So Martha and Snoop, classic, Broad City, The Curious Creations of Christine McConnell. So it's sort of, I think, touches on the tone of the show. And then the crew, which is a nice little bio. So it seems like a pretty small production, but they have a lot of clever ideas here. And then past work, and this is that Stuffed Peppers TikTok tutorial, which I also thought could have been a good first link to past work.
So yeah. there's a key thing that popped out at me here when I was looking through the treatment, and it was the references. And when I'm looking at the brief, there's a line in the brief that your videos should look and feel like they belong in the universe of At Home with Amy Sedaris.
Yes.
A kitschy take on home kitchen or crafting nooking tutorials and recipes for an incredibly niche audience. And so when I'm looking at inspirations and I'm thinking Martha and Snoop, Broad City, Curious Creations, and then At Home with Amy Sedaris, there doesn't necessarily need to be any other inspirations here other than At Home with Amy Sedaris, because this is ultimately a pretty targeted ask. How you interpret what fits into the world of At Home with Amy Sedaris, I think, gives you a lot of flexibility and freedom. But, you know, at the end of the day, if this is inspired by Martha and Snoop, that's not quite the same like kitschy, over the top feel that At Home with Amy Sedaris has. And so as I look at the pitch video, as I look at the rest of this, my big concern was sort of like, this doesn't necessarily feel like it's connected at all to At Home with Amy Sedaris. It's a craft video spoof. And so in a vacuum, the pitch, the creative is really good and really interesting. But because it doesn't quite plug into Amy Sedaris, I have reservations.
Yeah, and also when I think about Amy Sedaris, I think about like production design too. And I know, you know, there are some budgetary considerations around that. We'll get into her pitch video in a second, but just kind of paying attention to those details of the show to make it feel more connected to the universe, and maybe even showing like, hey, I plan to bring in this you know, set designer or, you know, person who's like really clever at coming up with colorful backgrounds. It doesn't have to be like a whole like vintage kitchen like Amy Sedaris is in, but it can be something. Maybe you can use like a vintage kitchen in your friend's apartment, you know. Just kind of trying to draw on how your show connects both visually to the show, and also, you know, with creating, as you said, kind of creating a persona and a character. How does that character connect to the show as well? What is their backstory? Because right now we're not getting really a backstory of who Danny is, you know, stuck at home with Danny. The initial concept of that is that she's a millennial who is on house arrest. So as you can see from this here, the log line is, in each video, we start with a brief title sequence from the exterior of a window, looking in to see Danny inside, trying to stay busy. She has greasy hair, doesn't care about how she looks, but still has an elective vibe and charming skater girl attitude. So I do like the idea that she's on house arrest, because that kind of relates to, you know, being stuck at home right now for all of us. But I also want to know, how does this character fit into that Amy Sedaris universe of quirky characters?
A general call out here too, because I think this is going to be an issue for, you know, six months, a year, who knows?
Yeah.
But there's this line, are you stuck at home because of a virus? There's this inclination from a lot of people, I feel like right now, to try and connect everything to the situation that we're all dealing with. And it makes sense to a degree. Like, you want to make sure you're thinking about it. You want to make sure that you're not doing something that feels tone deaf, but not everything needs to connect to it.
Mm-hmm.
Some things are meant to be a distraction or an escape, and some things aren't quite relevant. And so I see something like that. It's just a small point, right? I'm not necessarily mentioning this as a critique of the pitch in general. It's just that I see a lot of pitches for Sci-Fi fan logo videos, right, where they're trying to weave this in. And like, A, the situation is uncertain. We don't know where we're going to be by the time your video comes out necessarily. And B, the brand, you know, if they really want that, they'll mention it. Otherwise, not everything out there has to be COVID related.
Yeah, and I do think people have fatigue around it too as well. So you just want to, I think, as a creator in general, be aware of that and, you know, think about how either you want to go the complete distraction route, or touch on it in a way that, you know, kind of is more novel than how, you know, others have been approaching it. And then let's go ahead and look at the pitch video now that we've gone through the treatment. So yeah, she put together, and this is a great way to use the pitch video, by the way, you know, as basically like a proof of concept. So I'll go ahead and turn that on.
I woke up this morning and my stomach was growling. I made some toast, but I needed something better. So I put egg on it. I put an egg on it. Put an egg on it. It's like making pizza.
So yeah, she put together this like awesome music video. It's so funny. And again, I love using the pitch video as an opportunity to do a proof of concept. I think that is such a great use of that, especially if you don't just want to like talk straight into a camera. But again, with proof of concept, there are a lot of things to consider, right? And as you said, the main line in this brief is it needs to connect to the universe of Amy Sedaris. So I think we do want to see that a little bit more on screen. And also, you know, the brief is asking for crafting tutorials. And it's funny because I think in her treatment, she has like really awesome ideas for crafting tutorials, making pot holders, gardening, graffiti art, tie-dye shirts, how to make your own bath bombs. So these are all real DIY tutorials. But the put an egg on it doesn't really touch on like an actual tutorial. And I think that's kind of a key part of this brief. So I would have liked to, and there's a lot of things you can do with eggs, right? And eggs are really something that, you know, are harder to cook than you'd think. So I would have liked to have seen her like teach us something within that funny music video. So yeah, and then in terms of, Stephen, I'll let you touch on this. Does this seem logistically feasible?
Yeah, I think on the whole, you know, one of the open-ended questions on something like this is, you know, Amy Sedaris' show has a very, you know, very obvious and specific production design element to it. You know, the colors, the set design, everything. And so, you know, with a limited budget and limited time, the challenge is like, how do I do something like that? You know, but that kind of restriction, that kind of challenge is like inherent in all filmmaking. And so to me, it kind of feels like, all right, I have to use a lot of tight shots. I have to minimize the amount of things that I need to include that would have to be on brand or sort of like on, you know, on the right level for Amy Sedaris. And in that pitch video, you know, we got a lot of medium shots, wider shots, and there's so many things going on that it felt to me like it would be very difficult to make that feel like it was a part of the world of Amy Sedaris. Mm-hmm. Without having the budget to production design everything or, you know, deal with COVID restrictions.
Right.
So, you know, as a tutorial video, I would sort of hope for something that was going to be so much tighter. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's doable, but I think doable in the way she might be proposing is actually more difficult.
Yeah, I would have
than-
actually liked to have seen her put more budget towards like some of those elements you were talking about. I think she could have used like, or could have like, talked about how to kind of spread out that budget from like a visual point of view. But yeah, I think overall it's a really great pitch. It's really funny, and I think it was a finalist. So that's awesome. So we're going to move on to our next pitch, and this is actually a project that you worked on, Stephen, the TZGZ Gets Weird Animated Logo Videos project. So do you want to talk a little bit about the objectives real fast for this brief?
First out, shout out to Jen. I saw she was online and watching. I love this pitch. I really dug this one. Yeah, so the objective with this basically is, I'm sure a lot of people have seen, basically every month we run sort of like an animated logo video project for Sci-Fi. TZGZ is their late night stoner animated comedy block. And so for these, we're essentially making 15 to 20 second videos that will end in a reveal of the TZGZ logo, because we're establishing for Sci-Fi that TZGZ brand. So it's animated, it's super weird, it has to be funny because this is a comedy block, not just weird. And we've done things in the past for TZGZ that were much more like psychedelic and stonery, but like this was comedy first, and I stressed that a lot in the brief. And so it's really open-ended beyond that. So it was just sort of an opportunity for animators to sort of come back with something weird, out there, and funny. And I think Jen did a really good job of that. I did really respond to this pitch. I thought it was really cool.
Great. Let's get into her links to past work then. She's submitted a couple animation projects here. Go ahead and play that.
Oh, this is her pitch.
Oh, sorry. This is actually the proof of concept video. Okay, let's first go into her links to past work. Sorry about that. Here we go.
Like a bird loves worms, like a wildlife loves leaves, like a frog loves swamp flies, like honey to the bee. I love my Kiko marinade teriyaki packed like a flavor grenade, and I love it like I love.
So awesome. And this is actually a spec commercial that she did. So I think that's just something to point out, is that, you can submit spec commercials for consideration, and if they're relevant to the project that you're pitching on. And then she submitted another one here. It's a kind of a different style of animation. Go ahead and play it. Yeah, really cute, completely different style of animation. So yeah, and let's go ahead and get into her brief. And then Stephen, do you have any comments on the
past work? The past work was really good. It definitely showed that she could do the work. It was entertaining, so it was great. And if you look at her pitch too, she actually included some helpful context that I really appreciated when looking at her pitch. One was drawings and animation buyer using frame by frame tradigital animation, or tradigital as she put it. And the other one was edited, animated, and directed in a time span of a couple weeks. And like that kind of context was really helpful, because oftentimes, and this isn't always necessary, right? But like someone's past work will be really impressive. But the budget was like $3 bajillion, and like the budget on the current ask is like $5,000, right? And it's easy sometimes for brands to be wowed by something, but context is required if it feels like it's so different, or it's hard to understand how that past work might be relevant. So hers would have been really straightforward, but she still provided context. I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah. And then, just let's go ahead and do a quick glance at her pitch here. Again, it's another example of, pretty simple look and feel of the pitch, just doing like a basic Word document, but it has a lot of substance. So yeah, just kind of giving, I do like the disclaimer of like, hey, I just found out about this project and I put this together in a few hours. I think that's sort of funny. Did a pretty good job. And she spent more of her time, I think, or less time on the actual treatment and more time just putting together an awesome proof of concept video that we'll take a look at. So basically just gave us the script of the proof of concept video here and how, and I think a key element of this specific brief was how to include the mnemonic TZGZ into the animation, or into the video. So I do think this concept really does do that in an effective and super clever way. So yeah, this is basically just a scripted proof of concept. So I'm going to switch over to her proof of concept video here that she did for us.
Zap, cheese. Tea, zap, cheese. Tea, zap. Ooh, easy, cheesy.
So yeah, really clever proof of concept video here. And I think that's an important decision to make. Should I spend more time on my treatment or should I spend more time just actually showing a little bit of what I'd like to do, through the pitch video? And then usually you don't have time to do both.
I think the benefit of something like this is, this was a single video and a really straightforward ask for the whole. You're not trying to necessarily like make sure your video lines up to the brand. The only thing that I think would have been helpful in a treatment like this was some references to the style that she was going to take in the video. It's not explicit, but when you watch that pitch video, I wonder, is that an animatic or a storyboard essentially, but not representative of what the final product will look like? Or is that close to what the final product is going to look like? Since it wasn't specific about that, and since the treatment didn't necessarily have a style or mood board, sort of evoking like what colors she might bring into it, or which of her specific styles of expertise she'd go with, that lingering question, I don't know that it necessarily was the thing that broke or would make or break this pitch. But I think it would be really helpful. Especially when you have a diverse skill set. You can't just sort of expect someone to watch that past work and be like, oh, this is what they're going to do, if you have a couple different options.
Yeah, and I also think that the two links to past work that we saw, they're two very different styles of animation, or at least just textures and color. And the first one kind of reminded me a little bit of like a Red Bull commercial, where you do kind of that very simple outline animation, and then one was like almost like a Pixar type of look. It wasn't as 3D, but yeah, I would be curious to know within the treatment, like, do you plan to add more colors to this, more layers, and how is that final like look going to be? But yeah, overall, I think she did a nice job putting that together very last minute. And then
and Jen too. Oh wait, we're still going. I was going to say, I've done the pitch. Please keep coming out.
Yes, please. Really enjoyed your pitch on this. And then to you, does the creative stand out? Does it feel right for the brand?
Yeah, I think the creative definitely stood out. Was it the clearest mnemonic? Could it have been funnier? Maybe. The thing about this particular project is that since you're giving people sort of free reign to be really creative and wild and weird and funny, it tends to be very competitive, and there's a very strong turnout. So I really dug it. I think that some of the other pitches might have stood out more. The other thing is that as entertaining as it is, it's not extraordinarily dynamic, and I feel like a more dynamic idea is more engaging. I could be wrong, but that's one thing that I think I would have liked maybe a little bit more. But nonetheless, it still stood out, and it was still a good idea. And
it's still delightfully weird, which I enjoy. I do enjoy looking at the TZGZ pitches from time to time. Okay, so this brings us at Stephen. Do you have time to do 10 minutes over our planned? Okay, cool. Let's do it. All right, so we have one final filmmaker here. Let's see if I can pull up his links to past work. So this is based on the Turdy Works Funny Shit video project, which is kind of a fun project. Let me see if I can pull up the brief here. Basically, this kind of touches on the same thing as the Amy Sedaris brief. Is just like it should feel like it's part of the universe of the Turdy Works show. So the show is basically about a woman, a reality show about a woman who started a crafting business around making gifts for that are made out of moose poop, and it's become somewhat of a booming business in her community. And they are very self-aware. They don't take themselves too seriously. It's a really great show to watch. And so this brief, or the way this brief was written, is basically looking for videos that share that Wes Anderson, New England vibe of the show. It should not make fun of Mary, her art, or her community, but where you take it from there is entirely up to you. So that's pretty open. And they are looking for any form, live action or animation. And so let's see if we can first go to the links to past work here. Perfect. Sorry, give me one. Oh, now my computer's stalling. Okay. All right. Nope, is it not playing? Sorry. Let me refresh though. Do I need to refresh this window?
All right. I'll take this moment to jump in on a question that I just noticed from Jen. What's an example of dynamic? I could probably share in this sort of YouTube comments afterwards an example of dynamic from like another older TZGZ video. But my thinking was that oftentimes when you hear the term dynamic, it usually means more movement, more cuts, more action, a more static frame, I think, maybe is a little bit less engaging. And so when I use that word, or when I hear brands use that word, it basically just sort of means like I want a lot to happen. We're in post on one of the videos for that actual same project. And it's delightfully weird and wonky and everything, but the background behind the characters is really static. Mm-hmm. And one of Sci-Fi's notes was to make it feel a little bit more dynamic. And so it was just about bringing other weird characters flying in the background to sort of make the whole frame feel alive. If that answers your question. And then we can switch back to this. I'm sorry to go on a tangent.
No, thank you for that. It gave me some time to make sure this is all queued up here. Okay, so this is from filmmaker Alan Del Tufo, and I'll go ahead and play. This is the first link that he submitted to his pitch for the Turdy Works project. Let's see. It's still not playing. Hold on. I did refresh the page. Okay, so let's try to do his second here. See if that works. It might be an issue with.
Hi, Pookie. You want your baba?
All right, let's see if I can play this one, because I feel like this one does touch a little bit more on the mockumentary style. Okay, well, I'll just give you kind of a brief description. This is sort of a funny mockumentary about a man who falls in love with a customer service robot on the phone. It's kind of like Her, but, a little scaled down. And then, let's go ahead and get into his pitch here. So I will say, looking at those two pitch videos, and knowing that they are looking for that New England Wes Anderson vibe, you do want to pay special attention to like production design. But it does seem like they are open to kind of a mockumentary style type of content to help promote the show. Basic. I think let's look at our first impression here. This is a great photo. And what's funny is in the show, they do have a guy who dresses like a moose to help promote some of their products. So I found that a little bit funny. And then, so mockumentary fashion, we follow around and interview Owen, one of the mooses from the area in Maine, where Mary collects her samples. He's cocky and arrogant, total diva. He claims that his poop don't stink. He has and leaves a large following everywhere he goes. It's a very funny kind of introduction here. And then a mood board. So we have some Bruno, some The Office, and then this is actually Mary right here. And then a casting board where you show a number of possible talent for the show. And then a quick bio of Alan DeTufo, and then his production team slide here. So yeah, overall, another pretty good succinct pitch. And then, Stephen, I'd like to hear your thoughts about a casting board real fast, because I think you have some interesting thoughts there.
Yeah, casting boards, casting in general in a pitch, I tend to feel is not helpful unless it's really meaningful. If the role is make or break for the idea and you have someone who's really appealing themselves, it's meaningful. And this actually goes back to like when I spent a decade in entertainment before this, and I used to work in the motion picture talent department of the Creative Artists Agency. And so working with like, Tom Hardy and Anne Hathaway and all these like, big talent. And oftentimes when you're packaging together a movie, even the idea is that if the talent isn't going to move the needle, don't touch the talent. Don't think about the talent. And just sort of including a casting board like, hey, we've got some random people, doesn't really move the needle. Everyone lives somewhere. There's talent around everywhere. It doesn't really say that much.
A key component to you're developing some kind of character persona who's going to drive the campaign in some way, sort of like Danny's pitch, where it's based around this millennial girl. It's a very specific character. Then yes, I do think it is helpful to know, but in terms of background characters, all that, I don't think it really adds too much.
Yeah.
And I don't think it, as you said, moves the needle, kind of weighs on your decision that much. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the creative real fast and whether it, the pitch addresses the core elements of the brief.
Yeah, I mean, I dug this one. I think again, it kind of goes back to that sort of style question. The Wes Anderson-y vibe is so specific. And when I think about something like the Bruno or the Office, it feels very different.
There are very different types of mockumentary, or kind of, very different styles. Mockumentaries kind of span. Yeah. I would almost think this kind of fits into that Christopher Guest sort of Waiting for Guffman type, where it is small town. You have that production value of that and some quirky characters, but. I agree. Bruno's a very different thing than even The Office, I would say.
Yeah, because the thing about The Office is maybe a little bit more on par, but Bruno is really over the top and ridiculous. And I worry in seeing something about a talking moose like this that it would be over the top and ridiculous. Whereas that sort of Turdy Works, Wes Anderson vibe is usually about characters who take themselves very seriously. But are ridiculous,
right?
In subtle, specific ways. So again, it's not that this couldn't work; it's that it kind of begs questions.
And I would say Wes Anderson's very scripted, and very, the dialogue is such a big part of his tone and the interactions and the acting between people and characters. There's always that kind of awkwardness. And then I think with something like The Office, it's more improvised. You have just a different style of writing, I think. I mean, The Office was very scripted too, but it did feel like a little bit more of a traditional comedy and not as dry. So yeah, very different tones. And I think that's a great point, Stephen. Just kind of really thinking and putting thought into your references and what you're referencing and how they, do any of them seem on completely different sides of the spectrum? And what does that say about, the creative that I'm pitching? And then just talking about, does the creative stand out? And does it feel like a right fit for the brand? It sounds like for this brief, they're looking for something very specific. And this isn't really a traditional brand, right? This is a reality show about a woman who started this business, and it's really starting to gain traction within her community. She's able to bring on more people to her business, finding support within her community. So there's these really touching moments, but they're also very self-aware that, she handles crap all day. That's basically a line from the show. She's very self-aware about that, and it plays a big role. So you can't really put your brand helmet on. I feel like you have to more put on your original content thinking cap on, I guess, and start thinking from that point of view.
Yeah, and there's another key line in the brief that maybe speaks to the hesitation I feel about this, and it was your videos should not make fun of Mary, her art, or her community.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think Bruno, I think of sort of that bright, that sort of biting critique that is inherent in the way Bruno
Yeah, you're trying to
things.
draw out negative characteristics in other people, by basically like heckling them.
Yeah.
Or trying to get them to say things that they, may not mean, or maybe they do mean, but yeah, it's very certain style. And so I think putting that reference in, it's something very specific, and you have to think about what is the producer, what is the client going to think about?
Yeah. Because the question becomes like, how can I do this and make sure that it doesn't feel like I'm making fun of Mary, her art, and her community?
Yeah, because I think the concept itself can be done in a way where it does feel like it jives with the show, where you're doing like funny interviews, and it could be like a really funny social viral thing that really does, bring new viewers to the show. But yeah, just thinking in terms of how do you plan to execute that? I would have loved to see them touch on that more, and maybe even script out a couple of things just to show like, hey, I can do this in a really delicate, funny way. And then last but not least, does this seem feasible?
What's really nice, I think, is that Alan actually addressed that.
Yes.
Tiny cast, small crew, 1 or 2 locations will make it possible to create this on a low budget during this time of social distancing. It's a mockumentary. I think it's pretty easy to execute, and because they addressed that, I felt pretty confident in that sense.
Yeah, I felt so too. And just also, again, this kind of goes back to production design a little bit too. And, kind of hitting that. I feel like the Wes Anderson comment in the brief makes me think of like, what do you need to invest in beyond just like the actors and, the cinematography, and just kind of what other elements are you going to bring? So I would love to have seen a little bit more of that as well. But otherwise, I think it's a really solid pitch. And that basically wraps up our Pitch Feedback Live, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and for being part of our very first Pitch Feedback Live session. Again, if you're interested in having us evaluate one of your past pitches in our next episode, please reach out to us at info@Tongle. And Stephen, thank you so much for doing this with us. It's always wonderful to have you on our show.
It is on our show. It is excellent.
It is. We have done this before, so. But
I enjoy it. I love to help. Hit us up anytime you have a specific question. I recommend this enough, and I don't see enough people take advantage of this. But we have project forums on all our projects. Ask questions.
Yes,
be as specific as you want to be. I try to be as diligent as I can be about responding as quick as possible. And in most cases, I'll respond and end up like offering suggestions or something too.
I think that's a really important note. If something in the if something in the brief kind of you get that little ping of like, ooh, maybe I should dig into that a little deeper. But like, what does being part of the Amy Sedaris universe actually mean? Are you looking for like really cool sets? Are you just looking for a funny character? That like, if you have a question about that before you start pitching, write it in the forum, and our producers usually get back to you within a few hours.
Yeah, and look, we do our best to distill down what the brand says it wants for every project, but the brand is not perfect, and we are not perfect, and so there will always be questions that we could not have even foreseen that you may have. So if it's something as simple as like, what does dynamic mean to you guys?
Yeah.
Then we can jump in and do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.